webinar, which is all about tools and strategies to embed fairness, inclusion and respect for SMEs. So my name is Maria Coulter and I'm joined by Sarah Gouveia. Do you want to say hello, Sarah?
Hello everyone, I'm the FIR Events and Marketing Officer, within the school, and I work on the FM side of the school as well. Hope you enjoyed the session.
Brilliant, thank you. So for technical support, hopefully everything's going to run smoothly, although I think I did cut myself off right at the very beginning because Sarah said, wait until it starts recording, and I think I just jumped the gun a little bit. So I'm obviously enthusiastic to be here. If you've got any technical sound difficulties, you can dial in, so the number's there, and with the PIN number as well. And also get your questions ready and drop them in the comments box, and we'll answer the questions at the end, or it might be that it's relevant to answer them as we go through as well. And we are recording this session and it's going to be made available in the FIR resource library. So if you want to share it with anybody in your business and your organisation afterwards, then you can do that. So I think we're going to have a quiz first of all, Sarah, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So I will quickly run through the SME poll just to figure out who's online, how many small, medium enterprises we've got with us today. So if you don't mind just answering that, clicking yes or no or don't know, that would be very useful. I'll give that a few seconds. Okay, I can see we've had 50% of responses. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, we'll stop it there. Lovely, thanks a lot for participating in that. That's really helpful. I will move on.
Okay, brilliant. So my question is, why should you bother to embed fairness, inclusion, and respect into your company? Some of your employees, they might say, I've never felt disrespected. I treat everyone the same. I've heard this one a lot. I call a spade a spade. But have they ever considered someone else's perspective? So to start this off, I'm going to say, let's hear from Matthew. So Matthew's a young white male and on paper, an ideal candidate for our industry.
Setting foot into the subcontractor world. And I can remember just before I said yes to working in this company, I had thoughts about leaving the industry completely. It might be worth actually saying now that, I am a construction leaver. So I don't work within the industry anymore. Hence why we're having this chat now. So that was about 3 years ago. And then I spent a year in the world of subcontracting as a site manager, again, for a well-established subcontracting company. Most of the projects I was working on was on the sort of process side of the industry. So I was working on I worked on nuclear projects, oil and gas, pharmaceutical, clean rooms, environment. And it was, why did I get into the industry? I can remember giving this speech to you at the Construction Industry Council, and I got into the industry for problem solving, for challenges, for creativity, for innovation, for working as a team, working within teams, and all the amazing travel and opportunities and that come within the industry. But what I didn't sign up for was the extremely sort of macho and oppressive environment that took me to step away from the industry to realise that I was very much involved in and just completely within the middle of that.
Sorry, Maria, I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
Lovely.
We're having all the technical difficulties here right now. It was really interesting for me when I recently interviewed Matthew. So Matthew's a construction leaver, and I recorded a podcast with him recently. There's some links at the end of this webinar, so you'll be able to click on the link and listen to the podcast. So he worked as a site engineer, site manager in the industry, and he left because of the reasons that he described, because he felt like he couldn't be himself, and he felt like he was morphing into somebody that he didn't want to be. So yeah. So this is what he said. So he said, I was attracted by the problem solving, challenges, creativity, innovation, and travel opportunities that come up with the industry. But what I didn't sign up for was the macho and oppressive environment that I found myself in. But let's hear from a woman from the industry who's talking about an experience that her daughter had recently. So there was a recent survey that was carried out by the Construction Industry Council, and we asked some questions, including, are we doing enough to attract and develop a diverse workforce? And this is one of the responses that really stuck out for me. So she said, the recent experience of my daughter as an apprentice has been very poor. I'm embarrassed on behalf of our industry for it, and we need to do better, much better. Behaviours are led from the top. So as that's the case, a lot of company leadership needs to start performing. So that's kind of setting the scene as to why we're here and why we need to focus on this agenda. So just a little bit about me. So Maria Coulter, this is me on the left now, although I've got lockdown hair, so it's definitely dreaming of going to the hairdressers right now. And that was me 30 years ago. I'm not sure if there's that much of an improvement, to be honest, but that was 30 years ago in 1990 when I was just about to start an HND in quantity surveying. So I went on to become a quantity surveyor and became a project manager. But around about the time of the last recession, I was seeing a lot of negativity. I was seeing a lot of unfair behaviour, people being treated unfairly. You know, people were saying, oh, you're lucky to have a job. And they just weren't being appreciated for their efforts. And I was definitely feeling that. So I made the decision then to train to be a coach. And that had a massive impact on me. And then I made the decision that I wanted to train to be a coach. So I went from being coached to being a coach and a trainer in the industry, because I love the industry, but I do recognise, and I think a lot of you on the call today will recognise that, you know, we do some amazing things, we build amazing buildings, but we definitely need to change as well. So I'm also a non-executive director for the Construction Industry Council, and I chair their diversity and inclusion panel. So by the end of today's session, so we're a couple of minutes in, you will be able to have a strategy to establish what needs to change in your culture and what you want to achieve, and also have an awareness of some tools and resources to help you on your journey to embed fairness, inclusion and respect into your business. But let's think about what fairness, inclusion and respect actually is. So when I was being coached, I did an exercise about values, and I realised that my number one value was fairness. And when I'd felt my buttons being pressed before, when people were being unfair to me, it all made perfect sense. So fairness is impartial and just treatment or behaviour without favouritism or discrimination. Full compliance with the 2010 Equality Act as well. Inclusion is valuing and appreciating everyone's uniqueness, their diversity, supporting people to do the very best job that they can, and creating a culture where diversity is welcome, where everybody can be themselves. And it's been proven. I mean, I did a webinar a few weeks ago about the business case for fairness, inclusion, and respect. It's been proven that if people can be themselves at work, they're 30% more productive, which is obviously going to impact on your profit margins, but also it positively impacts on their mental health as well. So, you know, creating that culture is so important for your business. And with regards to respect, so respect is a way of treating or thinking about someone. You show respect by being polite and kind. And when people are insulted or treated badly, they feel that they haven't been treated with respect. And I want to talk to you about the power of words. So words have a massive impact, and words can actually change your brain. Positive words can help promote the brain's cognitive functioning. They propel the motivational centers of the brain into action and build resilience. Hostile language disrupts genes that play a key part in the production of neurochemicals that protect us from stress. Even a single word can increase the activity in the fear center of our brain and send alarm messages, which then shut down the logic and reasoning centers located in the frontal lobes. And this is not just about words that you say to people. I think it can be words on an email as well. I mean, I recall, receiving an email from somebody when I was working as a project manager, and every time I got an email from them, I felt a chemical reaction in my body whereby I would, my heart would go, I would become anxious, I would be feeling fear. And then you sort of go into that fight and flight mode. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that, your words mean something to somebody, and they can be received positively or they can be received negatively, and how you communicate with somebody and the language that you use. You might think that it's fine for you, but it's not necessarily fine for somebody else. And I think that's the sort of big thing that we definitely need to think about when it comes to fairness, inclusion, and respect, that everybody's different. So let's talk about embedding fairness, inclusion, and respect into your SME business. So my first question is, where are you on your journey? Because, you need to sort of know where you're starting off from. And I want to introduce you to a coaching tool that might be able to help you right now. So this might be able to help you take the temperature of your business. And I suggested this tool when I was doing a workshop recently with an SME. They had all of their employees there, which was brilliant. And they were asking what they can do, to do more in their business. And I shared with them this model. So this is the GROW model. And first of all, you think about, what is the goal? So what do you want? So you're here on this call today to find out more about tools and strategies to embed FIR for SMEs. But what is it that you feel that you need to achieve in your organization? And then the reality bit is, what is happening right now? So you're bound to be doing some great things and positive things around this agenda. But what more do you need to do? What is the reality of the situation? Do some people get it? Some people don't? What is the temperature about that in your organization right now? And then you start to think about options. So what could you do? And that's when you can brainstorm different options. And I'm going to share with you some options in this presentation, but also some suggestions for action that you could take as well to take away from this webinar. And then the W is will. So that's the commitment. So what are you actually going to do to start to embed fairness, inclusion, and respect into your organization? And just to give you an example of how this could work. So if you've got a high level goal to embed fairness, inclusion, respect into your culture, what is the reality? Now, one particular reality could be, I don't know if we are compliant with the 2010 Equality Act. We don't have a policy in place. So an option would then be, I need to confirm compliance and we need a policy. And the will would then be, I will make sure a policy is put into place. So you first take action from here, if you haven't already got one, is to look at the Equality Act. So there's a link here that's an easy read for the Equality Act. I'm not saying anything about people's intelligence, but as a QS who used to read through challenging documents, anything that's easy is definitely good for me. And then there's also a link for showing you a template for a diversity and inclusion policy as well. So that's something that you could do straight away if you haven't already got that in place. But also thinking about the reality of where you're in now. How would you describe your company culture. And let's explore this a little bit further. So what is culture? So culture is the social order of an organization. It shapes attitudes and behaviors. Culture is a group phenomenon. It cannot exist solely within a single person, but cultural norms define what is encouraged, discouraged, accepted, or rejected within the groups. It can't exist solely within a single person. It resides in shared behaviors and values and assumptions commonly experienced through the norms and expectations of the group. It's the unwritten rules. And you will all undoubtedly have unwritten rules in your companies right now that are influencing your culture. And I'll give you some examples. So one could be, we have an open door policy, but don't disturb the boss. We believe in work-life balance, but make sure you answer an email from your line manager late at night. And never leave work on time. You know, that could be another unwritten rule. So there's bound to be unwritten rules in your organization right now. So take action, write out the unwritten rules. Ask yourself what norms your employees are holding in their heads, and ask your employees too. Like, this is something that you could look at together. It always makes me smile. And I mean, you'll probably pick up, I'm from the Northeast. So I remember in a workshop saying social norms, and one person said that they thought that I was talking about gnomes, as in garden gnomes. So, you know, hopefully that'll make you smile on a Friday afternoon. But also, does your company support a culture of openness, and does it accept difference? So there is a way that you can find this out, and I think it's about measuring your FIR journey. So measuring your journey is something that is really important. And as an industry, we definitely need more data. So I was recently on a panel that was chaired by Sir James Waite at Future Build, and I had to give a presentation. And I was asked the question, like, how are we improving, or is diversity and inclusion improving in our industry? And my response was that we are doing some great work right now. Like, you know, there's a lot of great initiatives, but everyone's in silos. I mean, I only know about a lot of them because, like, you know, with me being involved with the diversity inclusion panel with the Construction Industry Council, like last year I was on a parliamentary commission about looking about how we can get more women into industry, and I saw presentations from lots of different organizations. So I can see that there's great work happening, but people don't necessarily share all of that information. And we don't necessarily have the data either. So people aren't sort of sharing like what their metrics are, where they're starting from, you know, how is it impacting? So if this is something that you're thinking about as a company, I would encourage you to have a look at this webinar. So this FIR webinar is all about monitoring and reporting on workplace diversity. So if you don't measure where you're starting from, how can you measure improvement? And here are some examples of some questions that you could ask to gauge if your people are engaged and they feel like they belong. And it might surprise you if you start to ask these questions. So I feel like I belong at my company. I can voice a contrary opinion without fear or negative consequences. And that could be an unwritten rule. Like, an unwritten rule is you don't speak up. You just put up and shut up. Perspectives like mine are included in decision making. My company believes that people can greatly improve their talents and abilities, and administrative tasks that don't have a specific owner are fairly divided. So that gives you an idea of how you could start to look at monitoring and reporting, but definitely have a look at this webinar and learn how you could apply that to your business. So now you've potentially got an idea where you're starting from. If you take these action points, what could you do to improve? Now, you might already be doing a lot in your organization, but you just haven't classed it as, you know, being as part of a FIR agenda. So Sarah sent out a copy of this report, which is Small Business Big Heart, and that was the Federation of Small Businesses. So if you click on that link, if you haven't had the opportunity to look at it, then you can have a read. There's some really good information in there, and there's quite a few construction examples as well. So, you know, you might be employing people from your local communities right now, like in the sites that you're operating on, or will be when things get back up and running again. Flexible working is something that everybody's been launched into right now. So it's going to be really interesting to know, like, what you're going to keep, like who, you know, how much flexibility are you going to keep moving forwards. So definitely have a look at this this report and brainstorm some of the things that you're doing, because that was one of the bits of advice I gave to one of the people in the workshop recently, was have a brainstorming session and think, well, what are we actually already doing around fairness, inclusion and respect that we just don't class as that? So I think the more that you learn about it, the more that you realize like what you are doing. But I want to talk about leadership, because sometimes in big organization, like this agenda is left with, you know, people are pass it on to the HR department. I mean, the HR department do an amazing job. But if you're an SME, you don't necessarily have an HR department. But regardless of that, like for anything to work, leaders have to buy into this. They have to want to do it. Like it's got to come from the top down. So my question is, you know, are your leaders leading inclusively? If you're a leader in your company, are you leading inclusively? And there's 4 principles of inclusive leadership, and they are empowerment. So inclusive leaders enable diverse talent and teams to grow by encouraging them to solve problems. And it's about moving away from the leader as a hero figure. And also courage. Inclusive leaders stand up for what they believe is right. They challenge existing norms, and they call out both conscious and unconscious bias. And I know from experience, it can be really tough with SMEs. Like I work a lot with SMEs and micro businesses, and they can find it really difficult because, you know, it's hard to get good people. It's hard to get good subcontractors. So, you know, you might be employing subcontractors yourself. It can be really difficult engaging with the right people. And sometimes you feel like, you know, you don't want to rock the boat because you're worried that you might lose somebody or something like that. But I think it is having that courage and, you know, having those strong values and you know, really kind of bringing that through in your leadership. And then you find that you attract the right people, you know, who've got similar values. And you know, so I think having courage is just really important, especially with this agenda. Humility. An inclusive leader is someone who creates an organizational environment where it's okay for them and others to admit their mistakes. Now, I certainly found as a project manager, I felt like I couldn't make a mistake. You know, I felt like there was a lot, you know, if you make it, I felt like as long as everything was okay, everybody just let me get on with stuff. And the minute I made a mistake, they came down on me like a ton of bricks, and it was really difficult. So I think, you know, if you create an environment where people feel that it's okay for them to make mistakes, I think is really good. I mean, obviously you don't want people to keep making mistakes, but it's good to have that culture. Accountability. Inclusive leaders hold themselves and others to account. And this involves questioning hiring managers and reviewing differences in performance management. So you could take action today. You could click on this module, do an e-learning module on leading people inclusively. And that it also includes something in there about unconscious bias as well. And this, you know, there's information on the FIR toolkit about that too. So the reason why I highlighted performance management is because, you know, my next question is, do you performance manage your people? I worked a few years ago with an architectural practice who were an SME, and they used to have mandatory performance appraisals, but then they made it voluntary. And it was difficult because then they didn't have a formal mechanism for performance managing everybody. So they were finding that the people that probably needed some performance management, they weren't putting themselves forward for an appraisal. So they then changed back, but they went to a more informal approach. So, for you to embed fairness, inclusion, and respect into your culture, you will need to get your people on board with this agenda, and they will be able to help you. So they can contribute to that. So I guess the question is, what standards of behaviour are you setting for your people? And how are you managing their performance and their contribution? And informal check-ins, so they are becoming a more common replacement for the old-fashioned performance review. And there's a link there that there's an Investors in People article about performance management appraisals alternatively. And that could be something that suits your company more. So it just depends on the size of your company as well. But definitely have a think about the performance management side of things, because this can help you determine what training is needed as well. And that brings me on to investing in fairness, inclusion, and respect training for your people. So there's a couple of things that I've got on here. So one of them is an introduction to FIR. And I think, I've delivered quite a few of those, and it's really a great opportunity for people to really sort of get those conversations going, because you can put posters up, you can put stuff out, on email, you can send people information, but I think it's when you start to have those conversations that people start to really get what it means, and when they share their experiences as well, and you can learn from each other. I think that's really powerful, and it just gets people thinking about how they could potentially be impacting on other people and how other people are impacting on them, and differences in opinions, and why is it important, understanding the whole challenges that we've got as an industry, the fact that we're fishing from a very limited talent pool right now and we need to expand that. So there's a lot of discussion and workshop that sort of goes on in these sessions, which is really good. And people do have light bulb moments. I had a light bulb moment recently when I was delivering this workshop, and I was having a conversation with one of the breakout tables, and I was saying how I, as a project manager, when I was working in the industry, felt like there was a massive need for me to be perfect. Like I couldn't make a mistake because I was a woman doing the job of a project manager leading teams. I felt like I couldn't make a mistake because I was a woman. And then a man on the table said, well, I feel like that every day as well. So it just goes to show you that we've all got different thoughts that are going on in our heads, but until you start having those conversations, you don't know. And then some people in your organization might then express an interest to become a FIR ambassador. So that's about how you start to embed practice into your company. And the things that we cover on this course is about overcoming barriers. And there's bound to be barriers. You could probably think about what they might be right now based on what you know in your business. And we look at potential workplace scenarios as well. So I've put an email on there so you could contact Sarah if you're interested in finding out more about the training. We are doing it virtually, so we've all had some fantastic training on how to deliver virtual workshops. And sometimes you still end up clicking the wrong buttons, as I've done today. So there you go. And if kind of the training that's needed in your organization, you could start to think about things like how you set up an inclusive site and site office, because sites can have their own culture, they can have their own microculture. I mean, it completely depends on the personality of the people that are on there, the subcontractors you've got working on there, like the client. It's almost they've likely got their own microclimate. So there's an e-learning module about setting up an inclusive site and site office. But also the toolbox talks are really good. Like, they're really short videos, but they're really powerful. Like the one on respect, you know, I think that's about a young trainee. You know, they're really powerful, and they can spark conversation as well. There's one on mental health and well-being, and there is a big link between fairness, inclusion, and respect and mental health. You know, if you can't be yourself, if you're in fear because of you know, how you're feeling at work, then it impacts on your mental health and well-being. And also think about recruitment as well. So, you know, we need to cast the talent pool more widely. So how are you recruiting people? So there's an e-learning module on recruitment as well that you might want to consider. But also you can learn from others as well. So there's some case studies that you can have a look at, and there's a few SMEs on there that are sharing their experiences. So have a look at the case studies and see what's working for other people as well. So there's a question here: how do you deal with shades of grey? Take for example an organisation where women employed and diversity stats are good, but the types of individuals employed reflect the prevailing culture in the organisation, closed attitudes, or are fair themselves, able to robustly stand up for themselves in that environment because of their background. Sorry, I will definitely respond to this question, but I'm just going to finish what I'm doing now, and then I can sort of focus on that question. So we move on to action planning, about taking action and measuring your FIR journey. So this is an example of what Waits are doing. So Waits have published where they are now. So they've said, you know, what their statistics are, but they're also published where they want to be by 2025 and how they want to improve. So they can put together an action plan, and I'm sure they already have, to say, like, how are we going to break this down? What are we going to put in place? How are we going to improve recruitment? How are we going to improve, you know, what internal organizations do we need to put in place? How do we need to train people? Like, they will have an action plan that sits behind that. So, you know, if you can measure your journey and set some goals and targets, you can reflect sort of what's working and what isn't. And I've just put an example in here of what an action plan could look like, and you can revisit this sort of after the session. Think about what you're going to do to progress, and what resources do you need, who is responsible, and what success looks like for you. So I would encourage you to take action after this webinar. So we said by the end of today's session, you will have a strategy to establish what needs to change in your culture and what you want to achieve. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to go back and revisit the GROW model. You'll be able to think about what your reality is, what's happening in your culture. Think about what your unwritten rules are from a starting point of view. And also potentially do a survey out to your employees to take the temperature of where you're starting from, and, you know, what needs to be addressed. And also, I hope I've given you some awareness of some tools and resources to help you find, you know, what you need. And I just wanted to go back to one of the slides again. So on here, you've got the FIR toolkit. There's a link to the FIR toolkit, and there's a lot of information on there. I've just taken some extracts from that today, because I didn't want to like bombard you too much with information. But I wanted to sort of give you an idea of what you could do and how you could take action. So I guess my question is, what is the one thing that you're going to do today as a result of today's webinar? So if you want to put some comments in and say what you're going to do, then that would be brilliant, because it gives us an idea of what you've taken away from this, first of all. And also recommended books as well. So if you listen to books or read books, there's some books here that could help. So you've got Managing Diversity and Inclusion in the Real Estate Sector. There's Start With Why, Simon Sinek, about purpose. there's the book about purpose that I said about, that I quoted from at the beginning with Kevin Murray. There's a book about brand as well, and also traction, which is about breaking down actions as well. And also, I've got a podcast called the Construction Revolution Podcast, and there's a few episodes on here that you might find interesting. So there's a purpose one that I mentioned, values-driven business, why I left construction, which is the one I quoted from right at the very beginning. Goodbye dinosaur thinking, hello construction careers. So that's all about becoming a youth-friendly employer. And there's one about brand and standards as well. So if you listen to podcasts, have a listen to that as well. And we've got some upcoming FIR training as well that you can click on and have a look at as well. So I'm just going to start looking at some questions. So we've got a few questions coming in. Sarah, I think.
Yes, so we do have a few questions. So maybe, do you want to tackle that big one that you initially read? So how would you deal with the shades of grey? For instance, take an example, an organisation where women employed and diversity stats are good, but the types of individuals employed reflect the prevailing culture in the organisation. So the closed attitudes, for instance, or are fair themselves, but they are able to robustly stand up for themselves in the environment because of their background, e.g. previously involved in sports or come from a family with a construction background.
Okay, so shades of grey. So an example, an organisation, women employed and diverse stats are good, but the types of individuals. Okay, so it sounds like the numbers are there from what you're saying. So the diversity stats are good, but it's not actually impacting on the culture. So I think it comes back to it's about embedding that culture into your organization, but I think that's got to come from the leaders as well. So I think there's got to be like an acknowledgement that that we've got some challenges and we need to do something about it. And that's where the strong leadership comes in. It's like that unconscious bias. Like if somebody's employing somebody that is like themselves, then that culture, it's difficult to change. So it's about understanding the need for diversity in that business and for it to be like true diversity rather than it just looks like it's diverse. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Maria. What else have we got here? So let's have a look. Challenge the COO, as we don't seem to be applying this, certainly during COVID-19, and those who are furloughed who seem to be forgotten about. What do you say on that, Maria?
So
I think it's more of an idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing about the furlough and how you're connecting with people is really important. I mean, I did a coaching session with one of my clients who's a trainee, and she's meant to be finishing her trainee course in June, July. But what we actually discussed was her kind of taking control of that and thinking about what CPD she could be doing. I mean, there's people can do CPD on furlough. So, I mean, it could be an idea for a business to actually think about, if they've got people on furlough right now, like what do they feel like they need to change in their culture, and how could they get people on furlough to help and support that? Like what training could they be doing right now that could potentially make a difference to the culture in the future? So yeah.
Great, we've got some other ideas come through. So informal performance talks with on-site teams. Someone else has said, I'm going to recommend to my manager that we do an employee survey. So do you have a standard template for a starter for 10?
I don't personally, but I'm sure we can have a look at that. There's a lot of resources, and on the webinar, the trainer who delivered that webinar might have something as well, I think.
Definitely, we can come back to you on that, Jo.
Yeah.
What else have we got? So review what we already have in place and what it actually means. Do we do what we say we do? That's always worth going back to. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, there's a lot of people pay lip service to this. They say, "Oh yeah, we do that. Yeah, we do that." But do you really like? And I think that's why something like survey is really good, because that's when you really kind of get to grips with what is actually happening. I mean, I remember a company I worked for in the past. They did the Times 100 survey. Like, they got people to answer those questions, and it was really interesting, like the results that came back, because you could actually see from that survey like where the good managers were and where the not so good managers were, and you could see like the difference, like the different teams were saying. And I think it's about having that sort of consistency in the messages and getting it out to everybody to really sort of get that culture in place, because otherwise you just end up with pockets of people who get it and who end up disrupting people and making them unhappy. And then you get the people who are great and then they do get it as well. So you can have a look at the toolbox talks and the videos, which is great. And I'd like to carry out the writing down the unwritten rules exercise in our FIR working group. And as a wider company exercise, I think it would be an interesting exercise to find out how people really feel. Yeah, definitely. I think taking the temperature of where you are right now is really important, because then you can define sort of, what you need to do to get there, and definitely have a look at the grow model as well. And Sarah, do you want to say anything about the upcoming FIR training that we've got going on?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have our first quarter in place. Everything's up and live on the website. So do take a look at the upcoming FIR training. We've got a couple there on the screen for you, and we will share the slides with you after the session. So keep an eye out for those. We do have virtual workshops, so they are replacing our face-to-face workshops with a lot of interactive activities planned in. Those are capped in terms of numbers, so we're looking at up to 20 attendees on those. And then with the lunch and learns, brunch and learns, it's only about 45 minutes of your time, and they're really geared towards introducing these key topics to you. So yeah, I'll send that round, and you can book on if you wish.
Super. And I mean, I'm doing there's this one on the FIR challenges and obstacles for SMEs, lunch and learn. So if you want to send in what challenges and obstacles you're experiencing right now, so Gillian, like you were talking about the shades of grey, like if you want to send some information, so if you email Sarah, if you send some information about what challenges you're facing, if anybody else wants to do that as well, I can incorporate that into the content. So, you've been on the call today, you've hopefully got some ideas, and I can then start to help you specifically with some particular challenges that can be worked through in the next webinar. So hopefully that would help you moving forwards. So I think we've just got time to do the survey, is that right?
Yes, so when we finish up and close the session today, please do spare a couple of minutes to give us your feedback. It'll be much appreciated. But thanks, everyone. I think that's all, Maria, in terms of questions. The last thing we had is, when is a Becoming a FIR Ambassador session taking place? So we are in the middle of doing our planning for our next quarter, so those events will be released over the next couple of weeks. I would recommend just keeping an eye on our events page. That's all from us for now. Thank you so much, Maria. That was great. And this will be it has been recorded and will be published on our website, so made available to you all. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody. Have an awesome weekend, and thank you for staying on and listening.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.